Hi, I'm Colleen Delaney, and this is a reading check-in. Hi, if you're new here, I talk about books and writing on this channel. In the description, I have links to my newsletter, some of the books I've written, fun stuff like that. If you enjoy watching videos that are just laden with book stuff, you'll probably like this channel. Today, we're gonna do a reading check-in video, which I did one of these at the end of March, and I really liked doing it instead of a traditional wrap up and TBR. And I thought it would actually work really well for this month because of what May is actually going to look like. So I'm going to start this video by talking about the books I read since my last check-in, and then I will end the video with what I'm hoping to perhaps buy in May rather than read in May. Okay, let's just jump into it. And April was an interesting month for me reading-wise. April was extremely busy. My first traditionally published book is coming out on May 14th, The Hedge Witch. There's a pre-order link in the description if you're interested. But I had a lot of just the last minute type stuff that I had to do for publishing it, for it coming out. And that took up a lot of my time. And so a lot of evenings, I would just be so wiped when I was finally going to bed that I didn't feel like reading. And so because of that, I got into a bit of a book slump because I started with two books that were just a little bit more of a slog than I had pictured them being, but I did manage to turn it around at the end of the month. And I read 6 books in April, and I'm filming this on April 29th, and I'm not gonna finish a book between now and tomorrow at midnight. I might read a little bit, but nothing will be left off. So let me start by telling you about the first book I read in April. I read This Spells Love by Kate Robb. I got this as an add-on a couple months ago. I didn't get it the month it came out, which was November 2023 from Book of the Month, but I bought it mainly because I thought it might be a comp for my book, and I want to make sure I'm reading comps. It is not a comp for my book other than the fact that they're both romance and there is some magic in them, but it's very different feel in terms of the magic. So this follows Gemma and Dax, and Gemma has just broken up with a man whose name I can't remember, who she dated for a very long time, and she's very drunk, and Dax is her best friend, and Dax, her sister, her aunt, and her are hanging out, and she decides to do this spell to make her have never met her ex. So then it works, and part of the spell is that she has to kiss Dax, which she does, and then she wakes up and she's in this other version of her life where she never met her ex, but Dax also doesn't know her because she met her ex the same night she met Dax at a party at a bar. And so she very quickly realizes that she's in love with Dax and she needs him in her life and all that. These are just, it's like fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. I just don't usually like the romances that Book of the Month picks. This was not a bad book. It was a fine book. It was just not really the kind of romance that I usually read. I did appreciate the friends to lovers aspect from Gemma's point of view, but Dax thinks she's a stranger, so there's not really the friends to lovers on his point of view. I thought the book was kind of it was a fine read, but it definitely got me started in sort of a book slumpy feeling because I wanted to finish it, so I was sort of forcing myself to read, which never goes well. Which then led me to pick up Lover Awakened by J.R. Ward, which this is the hardest book to rate. So these books are really thick. They're over 400 pages, which is pretty long for a romance novel. They're usually around 300-ish, 350. And I loved part of this book, loved it. And then parts of this book, I was skimming, trying to get through it. Okay, so this is The Black Dagger Brotherhood. This is book 3, I think. I didn't read book 1. I only read book 2. And then Zadist, who's the hero in this, intrigued me. And so I wanted to read his book. And then I saw it at Half Price Books. And I was like, good, I can read Zadist's book. Zadist and Bella are a love story. But this book has so many narrators. So we start the book off. And this had actually happened in the last book. Bella gets kidnapped by these I forget what they're called. What are they called? Omegas? They're they're like vampire hunters, and they're bad guys. And Bella gets kidnapped by one of them. And Zadist is trying to find her. And we get a lot of trauma. These books are heavy on the trauma. And he eventually finds her, and Bella is very much I'm in love with you. And Zadist is very much a broken trauma boy. And their relationship goes from there. But what bogs down this book is this would be an amazing tight 250 page romance between Zadist and Bella, but we get exposition and crap from the villain. We get it from future heroes. Zetas' twin brother, Fury. We get Torment. We get Revenge. We get Butch. Like, all of these other characters have narration time, where I understand that you're building up them for later books, but I almost wish it was pared back a little bit. This is where I feel this series is written more like a TV show, that it's like you have to have all these other B plots going on. Whereas I feel like when you're reading a romance novel, you don't need that many other B plots going on. You're like cool with the main characters and then maybe one B plot with other people you're setting up for the next book. So many future books were set up in this. Like seven future books. There's another kid who, I think his name is John. There's so many narrators in here. And so you just feel like, okay, I don't care about them. I just want to read about Zetas and Bella. So the Zetas and Bella part was fantastic. The rest was kind of a slog. So then I finished this book and I was like, I am in a book slump and I am so busy with work and I don't know what to do. And I had like 5 days, I think, where I didn't read anything, which for me is very odd. I know a lot of people like take days off, but I usually am like constantly reading something. And so I was like looking through, because I'm also, if you know, I'm on a book buying ban until my birthday, which is in a few days. And so I'm also looking through my Kindle and everything. I'm like, oh, I actually have A Nice Planet Barbarians on my Kindle. I should read that. And I did. And it was perfect. It was Barbarians Taming. I don't remember what number it is in the series. I've read a lot of them. Actually, I just opened it on Goodreads to say. Number 8. It's number 8 in As Planet Barbarians. So the hero and heroine in this are Hasten and Maddie. And Hasten has, in the last book, kidnapped Maddie's sister and like tried to force residence, but it didn't work. And then Maddie's sister ended up having a mate somewhere else. But so Maddie kind of hates him. And this starts as kind of like a friends with benefits, as they're both kind of like lonely. And Maddie's like, I just want to like have sex with someone. And so she starts sleeping with him, but he's like, I think I'm in love with this woman, even though they're not resonating together. Here's what I liked about this. You know, Ruby Dixon's doing a good job at keeping it interesting because, you know, we're on book 8 of this series and I think there's like 17 books. And she is doing a good job at external things happening to move the plot forward. Because every time I start one of these, and some of them have been a little bland, I'm like, is this going to be same old, hanging out in the caves, resonance, those weird Yeti-like creatures coming to attack? But there's like a big thing that happens that's really going to change the landscape of the series moving forward, and I really appreciated that. And this book got me out of my book slump. So then, I don't remember when this was. I think I just read this last week. So this is about a week ago I finished this, and my husband was gonna be out of town for 5 days, and he's coming home in a couple hours. And I was like, I need something to read while he's gone that is just not gonna upset me, not gonna make me sad. I'm just gonna love it, and I'm gonna fly through it. I have 2 other books I'm gonna talk about in a little bit that I did not finish, that I started. Not that I'm not going to, but I paused reading them. And so I did break my book buying ban and buy myself some good old-fashioned shifter romance novellas. And you know what? I burned through them. The series is the Grizz Mountain Shifters. They're by P. Jameson. I had read book 1 last year. I got it in the Stuff Your Kindle thing that I did. One of my books was in. And loved it, but I was like, I was trying to be good and like not buy that many books. And so I was like, I'll just remember it. So the first one was called There You Belong. And so then I just was like, I'm just going to buy the rest of the series. It's a 4-book series. I just did it. I got Intensive Bear Unit was book 2, Handle with Bear was book 3, and Some Bear Out There was book 4. And you know what? They were like perfect. They're very short. If they were hardcover books, they'd probably be like 75, 80 pages long. Not a lot happens. It's just these bears meet their mates. Their mates are not shifters, so they have to figure out how this is gonna go. There's usually a little bit of past trauma happening with either the shifter or the mate, and they fall in love very quickly. And it's very low stakes. It's not one of those shifter series where there's like a war going on with another shifter clan or something like that. It's like very low stakes. And it was perfect. And I read 3 of them in 4 days. So I gave them all a solid 4-star read. Like, were they the best books I ever read? No. Were they perfect for what I needed them for? Yes. Was I sad that this didn't have 9 books in it? 100%. Because if it did have 9 books in it, I'd probably still be reading them. As it was, I started a new Shifter series last night, but I only got about a chapter in because I was so tired. And so, yeah, but like, give yourself the gift sometimes of just like the equivalent of ordering pizza for your family when you're stressed out. Get yourself a Shifter novella. They're the best. Okay, so now I'll talk about the books I started and didn't finish. I'm not DNFing these books. They were just the wrong time for me to read them. So I'm filming on a Monday. So not this past weekend, but the weekend before. It was a nice day. I went outside. I was like, I'm going to read Shark Heart in its entirety by Emily Hayback, because I know it's one of those books you can read in a day. And I read just the first 18 pages. And I just, you know, when you're going to read a book in a day, you have to really be in the right frame of mind. And it has to like grab you immediately. And I read 18 pages and I was like, this isn't the day. This doesn't mean this isn't going to happen. But I feel like my stress level was very high in April. And I think this book's going to be a little stressful to read because it is about a man like slowly turning into a great white shark. And so, which I love weird books, but I was like, I don't think I'm in the right headspace for this. So honestly, I don't think I'm going to read this book in May. I think this is a June, July book. I feel like this might be a July book. Like, I don't know. I think I started at the wrong time. So I am putting this down for the time being, and I'm literally on page 18, so I might just start it over when I start it. The next one I'm a little sad about because a lot of people told me it was fantastic. It's a very popular author. I've never read any of her books before. This was my first one. I got to page 62 and just realized this isn't the kind of Shifter book I wanted to read, if that makes sense. Let me just talk about it. It's Bride by Allie Hazelwood. I was in the mood for a Shifter book with like no setup, no world building. I like, you know how, this is kind of a weird thing to say, but a lot of Shifter romance, it just takes place in like the Pacific Northwest or Montana in the United States. That's like just where it takes place, like a lot of the ones I read. And so there's not really world building. Like you just say, they live in the woods in Washington and I'm there. This is a different universe. So it's more, this is like a fantasy werewolf vampire, not a paranormal, which that's like what I write. Well, I would say mine skews more paranormal. I will finish this book. Like, I feel like if I had to go on like a plane ride and brought this, I would definitely finish it. But I'm just not in a place right now where I can go into it. It's not anything wrong with like even like Allie Hazelwood's voice or anything like that. It just wasn't grabbing me. And I needed something to really, really grab me. I also flipped through this and saw some spoilers, which is fine. I mean, I know they were going to end up together, obviously. Okay, so that's everything I read or attempted to read in April. Now we're going to move on to the second half of the video. I'm not putting together my TBR for May because, as I said, it's my birthday in a few days. And what I do every year on my birthday for the last like 5-ish years is I go to like 3 to 7 bookstores, depending on how my stamina is. And I'm very excited because I'm going to a new bookstore this year. I'm going to go to a new romance bookstore that opened within the last year. Not close to my house, but like within an hour, so I can drive there and go to it. And I'm very excited for that. But because of that, I don't have like a TBR. I have a wish list of books that I'd like to buy for my birthday, and some that I will order if I can't find them. But I thought instead of talking about like a bunch of books that are on my bedside table right now that I'm probably not going to read in May, instead I will just let you know what I'm excited about. Also, I usually like use this as like a way to build my summer TBR. I don't like to buy a ton of books in the summer. I like to kind of like buy a lot in May, and then I usually don't buy any books in July, but I'll probably buy a couple in June and a couple in August, and also book of the month, obviously. I have my laptop because I made a very long list and I don't want to forget anything, and I'm not going to be able to remember everything. So let's start with Lindsay Sands. Lindsay Sands writes the Highland Bride series. I've read 4 books in the series, and you don't really have to read those in order. So what I will most likely do is I usually go to Barnes & Noble last in my book buying, and I'll see if they have any of her Highland Romance series, and I will buy one as long as it's one I don't have already. And if they don't, I'll probably order one from Amazon when I get home. Next, The Virgin and the Rogue by Sophie Jordan. That's the last book in the Rogue Files series for me. I've read these completely out of order. I started with book 7, and then I read book 1, and then I think I read book 3, and then book 2, and then book 5, and then book 4, and so 6 is the only one I have left. So I'm not going to read this in May. I do want to buy it, but Sophie Jordan is usually like my break in case of emergency author. Like when I get in a bad book slump, I can pick up a Sophie Jordan and I'll just be out of the book slump. So I'll probably save that until at some point I get in a book slump, or like when it's July and I have a no by July and I'm like dying to read something I know I love. That's when I'll read that. Next, I want to read The Witch Collector by Teresa Weeks. This has been on my TBR for a very long time. She and I have the same publisher, and people are obsessed with that series. And so I really want to read it. And also I'm like a little bit in awe of how brilliantly she markets her books. I like study her Instagram. And so I want to read that book. I'm going to see if they have it at my Barnes & Noble. I don't know if they will. They might also have it at the romance bookstore I'm going to go to, but if not, I'll order it. Next, I just have in general Kate Canterbury. So she wrote In a Jam and she wrote Hard Pressed, which are 2 books I've read since I started this channel. And I really enjoyed both of them, and I want to read more of her. I will see if any of the stores have her. If they don't, I will probably order from Amazon underneath it all because it's the first book in a really long series. But if I can find one, not Amazon, I like to support bookstores, even like Barnes & Noble, which is an indie bookstore, because I want them to stay in business. I like being able to go to a bookstore. So first I'll check those places, see if they have any. If not, I'll order. And my last romance title is A Love Song for Ricky Wilde. I forgot to write down the author's name. Who wrote that? Tia Williams. And I have had that on my TBR since it came out, and I feel like that'd be a fun thing for me to buy myself. Okay, so now we're going to move into non-romance books. I have a nonfiction book, Grimoire Girl by Hilary Burton Morgan. You might know her from One Tree Hill. I loved One Tree Hill when I was younger. And she's married to Jeffrey Dean Morgan. And she's an author now. My best friend told me I should read this book. She read her other book, Rural Diaries, something like that. It's about living on a farm. And now she wrote a book about how basically she's kind of like a witch. And so that sounds right up my alley. If you have looked and seen what The Hedge Witch is about and you follow the books I review. I love witches. And so I was like, okay, that sounds like a good nonfiction book for me to read. And then I have some fantasy. I've got Lilith by Nikki Marmory, which is a Lilith retelling. And it has been said that it's in the vein of Madeline Miller, who I love. Lilith it's from like, I don't really know what you call it. If you call it like Jewish mythology, but she's the first wife of Adam, but then he wants her to submit to him, so she pieces out. And the Lilith Fair of the 90s, which I was not allowed to go to, and I'm still upset about that. That's where they got their name. I would like to get A Sweet Sting of Salt by Rose Sutherland. This was an aardvark pick, and I wanted it so badly. It is a fantasy. It's like historical fantasy, which is like my favorite. I know it's like sapphic, and I think there's like mermaids or sirens in it. I can't remember. There's something oceany, mythology in it. Next, I have a book my friend recently recommended to me, so I haven't really read much about it, but it's called The Butcher of the Forest by Premi Mohammed. And it's about an otherworldly forest, and a woman is trying to rescue the children of a tyrant. And the only thing that makes me a little nervous is it's fantasy horror. And you know how I don't do horror, but I feel like I could maybe handle it. We'll see. It's short, it's 160 pages, so I will probably see how much it costs before purchasing it in hardcover and maybe get it from the library. Cost dependent, because I usually do give myself a bit of a budget. And then lastly, I have the new Niveau. So I totally missed this and I couldn't believe it. I was talking to my friend who recommended The Butcher of the Forest, and I said something about, I think there's going to be a 4th book in this, what was called the Singing Hills trilogy, but I think that there's a 4th one coming out. And she's like, it came out last year. I was like, it came out? She's like, yeah, and there's a new one that maybe just came out too. And so then I was like, oh my God. And now I'm just looking at Goodreads. They have 8 are going to come out total. So Mammoths at the Gate and The Brides of High Hill are the 2 new ones. The Brides of High Hill is coming out May 7th. I always get these from the library, so I'm not gonna buy these because I don't know, I'm weird about that. If I start a series at the library, I stay with it at the library. But I think I might read those in May or June or July. We'll see. But they're on the giant TBR. Moving on from that, we have book of the month, and I have a lot of credits. I skipped April. So at the beginning of April, I had 3 unread book of the month titles. Yeah, because I had This Spells Love, I had Shark Heart, and I had The Great Divide. And I only read This Spells Love, as you can tell. I didn't start The Great Divide. I didn't try to. I brought it downstairs the other day. Like, I was going to read it, and then I literally never picked it up. So maybe I'll pick that up this week. But I am definitely going to get something from Book of the Month this month, because I also found with my book slump that I really wished I'd had a thriller to read this month, and I didn't. So I will definitely get a thriller. And there's several thrillers I have on my, like, backlist TBR. If there's not one that comes out in May that I feel like I want. So I will definitely get a thriller. And honestly, because it is my birthday month and I have, no joke, 20 credits right now, this might be a month I let myself go a little bit crazy. Depending on what the picks and what the backlist, or not the backlist, the add-ons are, I might just go nuts. Okay, so for May, the book of the month picks are The Ministry of Time by Kayleen Bradley, which I talked about in my predictions video. I actually just read through them all. I did a pretty good job predicting, which is great. The second book is Middletide by Sarah Crouch, which is a crime fiction. This tensely atmospheric story about a failed writer's uneasy return to his hometown is steeped in the natural world. The third is The Return of Ellie Black by Emiko Jean, which I also guessed. Missing girls and small town secrets are not the only things hiding in the woods of this Pacific Northwest outpost. Next is 5 Broken Blades by May Corland. That's fantasy. 5 killers unite for a high-stakes quest to topple an unkillable king in this bloody, exhilarating fantasy adventure. Next is The Paradise Problem by Christina Lauren. I also guessed that one. Money makes people do strange things. For example, get married for a mega inheritance, then actually fall in love. And lastly is Real Americans by Rachel Kong. And that is a lit fic, and it's epic and immersive. This big-hearted family saga tackles important questions of inheritance, destiny, and forgiveness. And because I just said I'm going to buy myself a lot since it's my birthday month, I am going to get Middletide, and I'm going to get The Return of Ellie Black, and I think I'm going to get The Ministry of Time as an add-on. And I might go crazy because I literally have 20 credits right now and get something off my TBR. No, I'm gonna get Familia because it's contemporary fiction, which I haven't read in a while, and I like contemporary fiction. The quick take is asking big questions. This moving novel follows sisters separated at birth who reunite to untangle their complex past. It's emotional, it has multiple viewpoints, it's about siblings, and it is a non-linear timeline. And it's got 63% of the people who bought it loved it. Let's add to the box. Okay, so that's a box of 4 for the first time, my biggest box ever. So I've got Middletide by Sarah Crouch. I have The Ministry of Time by Kayleen Bradley. I have The Return of Ellie Black by Emiko Jean. And I have Familia by Lauren E. Rico. And yeah, we're using my credits. Let's do it. Okay. So at the end of next week, you will get a video from me that will be everything I purchased for my giant summer TBR and what I picked from Book of the Month, if I didn't splice it in here. And that is set to be a very fun video, very fun haul video. I love doing haul videos. If you've made it this far, thank you so much for hanging out, and let me know what you're most excited to read in May, or the best book you read in April, or both. If you've made it this far and you don't want to write words, I will love a bouquet of tulips emoji to let me know you made it this far. And as always, I hope you're in the middle of a good book, about to start reading a good book, or about to start writing a great book. I'll see you soon.